Welcome to Full PreFrontal, the show that exposes the mysteries of executive function. This podcast is a collection of conversations about the role of the prefrontal cortex, which impacts your focus, planning, problem-solving, emotional balance, and independence. So join us as we explore executive function and the science of learning. And now, here's your host, the founder of EXQ, Sucheta Kamath.
Welcome to another episode of Full PreFrontal. My mission, again, as you know, is to help people discover or uncover the hidden gems in your prefrontal cortex, which is at its best, is able to guide, steer, and inform self to take the best decisions possible, adapt, and change. It's a pivot on a dime, and particularly resiliently show up in spaces where you are met with challenge. And that can be done if you become more knowledgeable about self, you are willing and able to self-discover and self-assess. And if you are even more prepared, then maybe consult some people and see if they can inform you to look at yourself from a different point of view. And that's the mission of this podcast, that how can we help people better themselves? How can we help people find ways to tune themselves? And let's not just think about ourselves. There are people we influence, such as our friends, family, our colleagues, our peers, and maybe whole nations. So in order to influence people positively and in a most enlightened self-interest way, I think the self-work is so essential. So that's why this very special guest, who is very graciously kind of maybe forced to, but maybe agreed to come back. And it's Elizabeth Sautter. She is a dear friend and a colleague, another speech pathologist. You heard our previous episode, which we launched on a very special day when she actually came out with the second edition of her very popular, very successful book. So today I thought we should really kind of hone in on her talent and ability to foster parents' ability to empower their children. So Elizabeth is a very she's award-winning speech language pathologist. She's a blogger. She's highly sought after speaker. She also is an author. She has produced these new deck of cards, which are really a treat for people to have it, and for clinicians or even parents to just have it handy on a rainy day or a non-rainy day, particularly if your kids are having difficulties. Great to reach out and to practice some skills. And finally, she also is a collaborative trainer for the zones of regulation. Leah Kuipers was a guest as well, who is an accomplished occupational therapist. And their collaboration also has empowered many, many clinicians to bring a message of hope and a very specific strategic process. So welcome, Elizabeth, to the podcast once again.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to clarify, because it is my pleasure to be here. You did not force me. I am honored.
That's because you're very generous and kind. So today I wanted to take some time and talk a little bit about your specific advice and approach to helping parents become the most effective, successful, and parents whose children are their partners, and you're not teaching your children, but you're working with your children, you're living with your children, and operating a one beautiful family unit. So tell me a little bit about your parenting principle. What influenced you the most about parenting? Where did you gather strength to find those skills and abilities that really make you a powerful influencer on parents?
And make it stick.
Make it stick, baby.
Make
yes.
It stick. That's make social emotional learning stick. The title of the book and my website too. So this is going to be, hopefully you're going to have to cut me off if I get long-winded here, because I have so much to say. So research really does show that parents, if they participate, and will enhance socialization and the social skills with their child. And so that's why the parents are a child's number one social emotional coach. And so we spend so much time in the schools, with social emotional curriculum and training for educators and teachers and therapists. And oftentimes we forget about the parents at home. And, when people and of people who might still be homeschooling their children. It's been my mission for so long to support the parents. But now it's even more, pronounced about the need for doing that, because now we're, schooling our kids from home. Okay, so the reason why I came up with my approach, I'll start from the beginning, is because I had a center, a multidisciplinary center in Oakland, California, with some amazing therapists, including Leah Kuipers was one of them, the occupational therapist that you mentioned, but other speech pathologists and educational therapists. And we would run a lot of social groups, and we would see the kids for an hour a week, and we had the luxury of having the parents there, where the teachers don't always have the luxury of getting to see the parents very often. And so we would always do parent training. So, this work cannot be left on the shoulders of the kids. They're not going to say like, oh, I just learned how to give somebody a compliment, or how to think about others, and how to pause before I interact in the group. And I'm going to go home and do that at dinner and at recess and whatever. It just doesn't work like that. So you can practice over time, and we're trying to build those pathways for the children to gain these skills, but the parents really need to know what to do as well. So every session we train the parents, and some of the parents said, oh, you should write a blog about this, or you should write a book, because our approach was really like, how do you do this in the natural environments in real time for what they're doing every day with their children? Parents don't have the time to go to a zones of regulation training or social thinking or whatever. I mean, some parents do, but if we can make this really simple for them and show them that they can actually boost social emotional learning when they're in the car with their child, when they're at the dinner table, when they're cooking dinner, when they're reading books or watching TV, that's just total empowerment, and bringing this to another level of confidence that they can embed this into their world. I call it embracing teachable moments. But then also too, another pivotal time with me was when my own son, I'm in third grade, was struggling. And, it was a big push to get him tested, because he was super high functioning and academic cognition, but he was struggling to focus and attend. And sure enough, he was diagnosed with ADHD, learning disabilities, and anxiety. And it was a lot to get him his services. But of course, I had him going to educational therapy and getting him the support that he needs. But even when he was doing that, the assignments were just sitting there looking at me. I feel guilty that I'm not doing the worksheets and whatever else that we're supposed to be practicing. And it was just another eye-opening piece of, we need to give this information to parents in a way that it's attainable for them, and that it can inspire them and bring on that confidence, so that they can then be calm. It's a self-regulation and self-care strategy for them to have these strategies in a simple way, so that they can connect with their children. So that's why I just said, yes, I have to write this book. And so that's the book, Make Social and Emotional Learning Stick, and the 2 card decks to go with it. The book is in context-based: home, community, holidays, special events, and bridging school and home. And then the cards are not context-based, but they're just real simple activities that parents can just open a page and say, oh, we're going to go on a car ride. What can I do in the car? Or, oh yeah, that's a great idea, like while I'm reading books with my child or watching TV. So that's the approach that I am on a mission to share. Is it doesn't have to be this big philosophy and theory and curriculum and framework. It just can be everyday routines and activities.
Well, thank you for taking the time and kind of walking us through this. As you said, personal experiences can be so powerful and grounding. And you talk so compassionately and candidly about your struggles, your son's struggle. So I appreciate that. Um, the thoughts come to my mind that you begin by talking about this, that there are many set of skills that that go into self-regulation. You have sensory modulation, you have language based information processing, we have social communication language, which we talked about last time, bringing a sense of coherence to life experience. And what do you feel are the challenges for parents when they and Elaine Taylor Klaus was one of the guests a while ago, and she also has complex kids, and she, as a parent, a coach, got informed from that. But I find that parents haven't thought a lot about shifting their parenting approach unless and until they run into a problem with their method not working. And this method may or may not be informed by anything very profound, but they certainly haven't given a lot of thought about why change. And what you talk about your work and I talk about in my work is change is required because the child is not responding. So can you talk a little bit about that resistance that you sometimes see in parents, unknowing resistance, or these children who are not responding to those traditional conventional wisdom methods? Why that could be? Do you have some examples for that?
Yeah. Okay. So I have, again, a lot to say here. One thing that I just want to say is, I can relate to what you're talking about because actually Carrie Lindemuth, who's a executive function coach, and she's one of the co-authors of the Brain Talk curriculum.
With Hannah Bogan, yeah.
Yeah, with Hannah Bogan. And she was actually my son's educational therapist. And when she trains a lot, she talks about how there's certain kids in different ways. And everybody has their own analogy, but she uses the analogy where there's some kids that are like weeds. You just, they're going to grow wherever you put them. You can't stop them from growing. And then there's some kids that are a little bit more like, they need more like an orchid, like they need more nurturing, or they need more fertilizer, or like a hothouse to to nurture them a little bit. And, as parents, we are not any parent, there's no handbook or guidebook, right? And then you have a child that has additional complex needs. There is absolutely no handbook or guidebook for that. And it can be really overwhelming and defeating. And even myself as a mom, and I felt like I was so equipped with all the tools being a speech therapist, and, I did babysitting and did a lot of childcare and whatnot. Bring it, bring it on. And then I have a child that's, atypical with developing and just struggling in different ways. And then of course you go down the Google rabbit hole, look at all the books for parenting, and it just can be extremely overwhelming. And, I pulled out all the strategies with my boys. I called myself a momathist because, as a therapist and a mom, you're just always watching for milestones and just trying to figure out what's going to help. And so I would tell all the strategies, and it worked when they were younger, Superflex and all these mindfulness. And I even caught myself saying to my kids when they started resisting a little bit, right? And I caught myself saying things like, well, research shows and blah, 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 and I'm like, I can't even believe I just said that to my own kids. And then, they started slamming I call myself a strategy saleswoman, and they were slamming the door in my face. And so then you just go down this like self-defeating, just overwhelm, like, what am I doing wrong? My child's not responding to this. And it just can be so overwhelming. And so then, hopefully you can get with other parents who are going, because it's really hard also too, when you're around parents who are kids are the weeds, and they're just like, oh yeah, she's off studying, or he's off doing a debate tournament, or, whatever it might be. And you're like, I can't even get my kid to take out the garbage, and so it's just, you have to have your cohort of other parents that's why we have the community and whatnot, Make It Stick parenting community is, so we can be with each other and support each other and realize you're not alone. It's not you, you're doing a great job, and your kid's a great kid, not broken, but there are things that we can do. And so how can we support each other in doing those things? And that's just been a big part of my mission is supporting parents and making sure they feel confident with the tools that they need, but also that they're practicing self-care and compassion, because this can be extremely overwhelming.
So talk about this idea of triggers that, you work in your book, you talk a lot about kind of helping parents tune into those kind of sticky situations and sticky points that maybe either the child or the parents together are tripping over, and that can lead to a big explosion. It can lead to a lot of unnecessarily exasperated household. So what are your suggestions? What are the triggers, and how do you suggest people discover them? And do you have some strategies for us to kind of apply to those difficult situations?
Absolutely. So triggers are basically anything, trigger can be something positive or negative. It's just something that sort of changes in the moment.
Oh,
We
yeah.
think about triggers as a negative thing, and that's fine because, negative things are the ones that we want different, right? When your child is having a big reaction, or you want it to go away, and actually your child having a reaction is oftentimes, most of the time, a trigger for us, right? So we want to
Yes.
fix it, and that's why we say silly things like, it's not that big of a deal, or stop crying, or whatever it might be. And then that, is like throwing oil on the fire, not water. And so there's little things that we can do to adjust. So I think that there's a couple of things that you mentioned, and this is not actually in my book. I allude to it, but this is in the parenting course that we have, is going deeper in figuring out where your child's lagging skills are. So because those can oftentimes be the trigger. So module 2 of the course is, module 1, we introduce the WISE model, which stands for wisdom, intentionality, self-care, and everyday strategies.
Love
And
that.
so the W, and then we talk about the parents being the wise owls.
Oh, I love that.
And so the W is the wisdom, and that's where you have to figure out where your child is struggling, and also where they have strengths, because we want to have a strength-based approach and focus on. Nobody wants to be honed like, oh, you're so bad at this. And if you had to talk about all your weaknesses all day long, you would just go into a shell and never come out, right? So we obviously want to focus on all the strengths and great things that our children have to provide and who they are, but then boost up their challenges. So you want to figure out where they are struggling, where those lagging skills are, because that, like you mentioned, it could be sensory overwhelm, it could be language processing, it could be executive function, task initiation, planning and organizing, working memory, whatever it might be. And then figure out where, at that moment in time, developmentally, where they are is the best place to support them. And we call, when they are continuing to have triggers, we call that kind of like the pitfall moments. You fall into that pitfall, and you fall into it with the child, or you can throw them a ladder and you can help them climb out. And that's that co-regulation piece of, meeting a child where they're at as an adult and helping them either up or down regulate. And those could be things like taking a breath for you, taking a breath for them. And even just doing that, it just changes the whole energy, even between the two of us and everybody listening. We want to be able to make sure that we're getting in rhythms with our children. We don't want to bring chaos to,
So true.
and we really, okay, this is what we talk about in our course, is we want to absorb the oxytocin, which is that love, nurturing hormone, and that's out of those meltdown situations. That's not when you're in the pitfall, that's outside. So that's that special time, that's the humor, that's that inside jokes. That's are all the times where you're absorbing the oxytocin, so that then they can be receptive and have that rapport and strong bond with you for when they need you, which is what we call the cortisol. Because when they're having that stress hormone that comes out, we want to be able to have them be receptive to us, to throw those ladders down there and help them get out of those pitfall moments, by using words, that by calming, validating their feelings. Maybe you even stop talking. You definitely change your tone of voice and your all the things that you do with their intonation, and all the things that it does to calm the subcortex, so that they can get back into that prefrontal cortex for initiation, and whatever it might be that maybe it's just even getting back to the fun, whatever it might be. And you also want to think about the environment too, how you're setting up the environment to keep their brain in a place that can have them be in a thinking and calm state.
I love that. And thank you for clarifying. I had David Burns on one of my podcast episodes, and we were talking about negative emotions and positive emotions, and then he helped clarify, which I had kind of forgotten, but that there are good positive emotions and good negative, good and bad positive emotions. Similarly, you can have good negative emotions and bad negative emotions. And I think similarly, the trigger is a also a nudge. So when it's a nudge to change, or it's a symbolic representation of change, it can be positive. It doesn't need to
Mhm.
be negative. So
Mhm.
that's great. And I love this concept also, which you kind of emphasize, is this co-regulation, to have that synchronous, with my parents, I call that synchronous swimming,
Mm.
kind of like the whole family is in the pool and we are synchronizing swimming. It's such a beautiful image. And what's so amazing about that imagery is what's happening under the water.
Ah,
So you don't just show the hands that are symmetrical, but the legs are symmetrical, but you can't see them.
mhm.
And then I think that idea is also very, very valuable for thinking about parenting. Talk a little bit about this, the other concepts that you talk about in your parenting discussions. I love this idea of social debriefing, for example, which kind of, or maybe before we talk about social debriefing, maybe you can talk a little bit about setting the stage for that social encounter and then debriefing. When I read about the work that you talk about, it almost seems like either after a great win or loss of a football team, or
Yep.
maybe White House debriefing.
Uh,
So what is this concept of debriefing, and why should parent really inculcate that into their relationship with their parenting of their children?
it's a huge piece for priming, whether and knowing what's expected is and having predictability and routines is like one of the number one, when you don't know what's expected, and having things being unpredictable is one of the number one causes of anxiety. And so we always call when we go to before we go to a party, is there going to be parking, is there going to be food, what are you wearing, because we want to be knowing what's coming ahead of us. And so this is something that we do in life all the time. And, we talked about in our last discussion about all the hidden rules that are in life. And so, and a lot of our kids, don't know because they never experienced those things. Maybe they have working memory issue where they don't remember those things. Maybe they have perspective taking issues. So they, forget. And it's just constantly changing from culture to culture, from household to household, from situation to situation. And so us as parents, we can we have this knowledge and we forget to tell it to our kids. So I talk a lot about, it's definitely like, priming our briefing and debriefing, like before a court case or the White House, or like, doing the before a game where you do like a scrimmage, and then you do post game or pre-game, the all the different plays that you have to memorize. It's exactly like
Yes.
that, and all the practices and whatever. We need to do that for social and emotional learning.
So true.
And so that's what I'm empowering parents to do. So in my book, there's, like I mentioned, there's 4 sections: home, community, holidays, special events, and bridging home and school. And each, it's context based so that they can teach in those contexts. And at the bottom of each page, I have the hidden rules. And these hidden rules start really, really early. At 3 months of age, infants start realizing the subtle patterns in their world. And so this is, everything from when meal's going to be coming, when you're going to be napping, to, bathroom rules, to library rules, to sarcasm, all the code switching and hidden rules that are just changing all the time. And so what we can do is we can empower our children to be aware of those, to practice that, to role play. We can write social stories, we can make movies. The deeper your child's needs might be, the deeper you might need to go with the teachable moments. And we want to be practicing this outside of the situation. So that's what I mean by the briefing and the debriefing, because in the car or before people are coming over or wherever it might be, you want to be briefing them, priming them, coaching them, scaffolding for what's coming ahead. This is, oh, don't forget, we take off our shoes when we go to these people's houses. And I know it's not part of our household, but we, just put your head down and close your eyes before we eat, because we pray, they pray, blah, blah, blah. And all these different things that you need to let them know about, so that they can feel comfortable and help with the situation flow. And then afterwards, you can do the debriefing, or what Rick Lavoie calls a social autopsy, and then talk about how it went. Like, oh yeah, like, it was so hard to wait for the birthday person to blow out the candles, and that was awesome that you did that. But when somebody, it's their birthday, it's actually they're the one who opened the present. So when you open the present, it was kind of a little bit unexpected. How do you think that made Johnny feel? And just like dissecting it a little bit, so that they can understand and hopefully have that in that working memory for the next time that they go to that birthday party, and they want to be invited back to Johnny's birthday party, right? So
Yes.
next time they won't open the present, or maybe they can send a little text to say, I'm sorry, or whatever it might be.
Can I share a funny story about
Please, I
my
have so many of
mom?
them too. The hidden roles. You go on and on, right?
Oh my God, yes. Well, my mother grew up in a very tiny, tiny village in India, and she got married very young. She was 19. And my father grew up in the city, Bombay, and he was much more worldly than she was. And when they got married and they came to the city, and so my father took her to this very fancy place. So first of all, you have to remember, my mother had not eaten at a restaurant, because that was just not part of the culture. You eat at home. It was considered, in fact, not kosher to eat at a restaurant, because you don't know who the cook is, who the chef is, whether they have washed the utensils, whatever. And so this was a particular joint where they would serve. It was a afternoon tea. So you would be served tea, and they would have this tier with 3 different types of pastries and cakes and things like that. And my mother did not know this, but my father thought she knew it, but she had never been exposed to anything like that. So you get charged for the amount of pastries you eat on this tier. Now, she grew up in a culture where you do not leave a single ounce of grain of rice in your plate, because that's considered rude. So here she is. So the waiter brought these 25 pastries on this tier.
Oh goodness.
And she's eating one by one. So my father is petrified, like, oh my God, I married a hog. My mother is saying, oh my God, like, I don't want to be rude, but the man will think that I'm just obnoxious. And so she's finally, after 15 of them, she says, I don't think I can eat anymore. And he says,
getting sick.
And so my father says, oh, I thought you were hungry. She said, no, I just didn't want to be rude and leave some unfinished. And my father had to pay so much money for the pastry that he thought his dainty wife will eat 1 or 2.
Oh my goodness.
So yes, debriefing would have helped.
Yeah, or priming. Right,
priming would have helped, actually, not debriefing.
Yeah, or briefing ahead of time. There's so many stories about, funny things that kids have done, and hopefully that, it can get like serious though. It could be safety wise, like
Yes.
not knowing what's expected in these situations. And so it's I have so many stories about kids in our social groups and how they've, not understood that. I have one in our group that, we're talking about perspective taking, and how, I always encourage parents to don't buy gifts on Amazon and for your child. Have them go with you to the toy store, to Target, wherever you're going to go, and have them pick out based on what they know about the other person. That's a huge perspective taking. That's exactly a tip right there, right? So anybody for the holidays, don't just buy your kids gifts that they're buying for other people. Have them be involved with it, because it's huge perspective taking, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So we had a birthday party. One kid came, and we always do a check-in in our social groups, and he said, oh, I was so happy. We talked about buying gifts, and usually one of the hidden rules was buying gifts for people, things that you like that they might like too, and things that you have in common. And so he was proud of himself, because he bought his friend, a teenage friend, he wrapped up his new favorite deodorant because he thought this other boy, because he loved it and it was helping him. So he's like, oh, this is a great gift for somebody else. But that's the nuances of hidden rules, right? Like you don't
You
really
do
give
not give.
hygiene products to, like, especially deodorant, maybe perfume or cologne, but not deodorant. But how is somebody supposed to know that what's the difference between giving deodorant and cologne? You know, it's all these nuance-based things that, and so he's like, and everybody laughed and I didn't know why they were laughing. And so we had to dissect and do that debriefing about that.
That's so funny. Yeah, because you're suggesting you stink. That's why here's a
Yes.
deodorant.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that you just pointed out here, which is so important, that I think parents may be underestimating the power of these simple everyday decisions, that just for convenience, I'll just order it, I'll get it
Yes,
ready, you just take
totally.
it with you.
It's
So
easier.
the mother has coordinated with the guest mother, what are his favorite books, what does he like, what does he already have, and
Mm-hmm.
none of that information. First of all, the parent has not empowered the child to do that investigation or perspective taking exercise.
Yep.
But also, I think at a risk of having to increase our work, we are compromising some of the foundational skill building process,
Yeah.
because we are trying to be very quick and convenient and be very proficient.
Mm-hmm.
So lastly, tell me a few tips that your parents are so grateful that they learned from you, that these are like the most amazing techniques that has changed what happens at home.
Um, I think, we went over some of them with the priming and the pitfalls for the actual situations, but I have to go back to one thing that I preach and teach all the time and practice for myself is self-care and compassion. So, parents and myself included are always looking for a magic bullet. What's that one strategy that's going to make it different? What's that one tool, or whatever it's going to be. And unfortunately, parents, I have to tell you, and I'm telling myself this every day, there's not one tool. There's not one magic trick. It's a path and it's a process. Um, And we've put together, in the Make It Stick Parenting course, what has really helped for our parents and what's really helped for myself on this journey. And I can share that with you another time. But the bottom of that journey is self-care and compassion. And what we mean by self-care is just doing things on a daily basis, whether that's mindfulness or walking or exercise or food or sleep or whatever, being around people that nurture you. Um, is doing that on a regular basis, because if you as a parent do not have water in your own pitcher, you can't pour in the cups around you. There's just nothing there. You have a dry pitcher. And so that has to be first and foremost. And parents often think, well, that's selfish, and they put themselves on the bottom of the totem pole, but it really has to come first and foremost, because even if you show up for your kids, you're not going to have the same ability to support and nurture or model, whatever it is that you need to be modeling, and you're not going to be able to take care of yourself. So, and then the other piece of it is self-compassion, which I follow the work of Kristen Neff.
I love her work.
And she, it doesn't matter how many, walks and exercise or bubble baths you take. If you're sitting there on your walk, beating yourself up and, talking about how poorly you did this and that and the other, and you're not enough, it doesn't matter. So, we have to treat ourselves like our own best friend and, have that one breath for me, one breath for you. And one of the strategies that she gives that I'll leave with as we were wrapping up is, at the end of the night is the most, for most people, is the most calming time. And before you're falling asleep, if you can put your hand on your chest and your hand on your belly and just soak that in. And then when you're throughout your day, you do that as a ritual at night. If you do that throughout your day, when you just need a little grounding moment, you'll come back to that rested state of self-calm, self-compassion. And so there's so many different things that I could suggest here, but we're short on time. So I we'll leave it at that, and we'll have to just do this again. We'll continue more.
We do. And thank you so much for sharing. I love this one breath for you, one breath for me. I think I love Christian Neff's work. And I think just to end with this thought that it's a journey. I think what I'm hearing is no matter, let's not think about us being parents to K to 12 kid, it's a lifelong journey. We can continue to better ourselves throughout this whole life that is ahead of us. So thank you for being here with us once again. Before I let you go, do you have any recommendations of your favorite books?
I have so many recommendations for parents. I would absolutely recommend The Whole Brain Child
I love that.
by Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel. And I have actually a while ago for my center, I did a book club with the parents. So I have some notes on that on a blog that I wrote a while ago. And then the other one that I would recommend that's been really helpful, and especially in our world right now with our kids, there's so many kids that have anxiety, is Dr. Dan Peters' work of From Worrier to Warrior. And he has,
I love that. Yes.
there's a companion book, one for the child and one for the parents. And it's been really phenomenal for my own son. My younger son has anxiety, and for the parents that I work with as well. So I love Dr. Dan Peters' work, and him as a person is just a fabulous. So I would recommend that.
Well, I am again very grateful for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. If you love what you're listening to, share with your friends. Please like us on social media and follow us. And here's to better parenting. Thank you,
Yes.
Elizabeth, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Thank you for listening to Full PreFrontal, exposing the mysteries of executive function. To contact your host, Sucheta Kamath, and learn more about her work on improving executive function, visit her website at exqinfiniteknowhow.com. That's www.exqinfiniteknowhow.com. Tune in next week for another informative episode of Full PreFrontal, hosted by the founder of EXQ, Sucheta Kamath.